Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 200 of this program. Yay! Episode 200. So, in our awesome episode 200, we have a show that is part of the Management Magicians series. And of course, that's our series devoted to those extraordinarily talented managers who are so deft and skilled at what they do that it appears almost like magic. And our specific show topic today, I think, is perfect for a milestone program for our 200th episode. Our specific topic today is why telling someone to think different or to think outside the box always fails. Why telling someone to think different or to think outside the box always fails. That is our topic. As always, I do encourage you to come by CourtneyAnderson.com. It's our central website where we have a library of resources available for you. We have our blog. We have 200 episodes of this program, with every single one of these programs having individual episode page or pages of supplemental material, links, and follow-up content. I do encourage you to come to our episode page for this show, episode 200. I also do ask that if you find our program out and about on the internet, on one of our distribution channel partners through iTunes or Stitcher or Spreaker or Libsyn or anything else, that you go ahead and leave ratings and reviews. It's really important that we have that visibility. And I am now on social media. I'm on Twitter at Zealous Business. So I encourage you to access my tweets. And I am also going to ask that you go ahead and sign up for our community newsletter and email while you're on CourtneyAnderson.com. We are constantly, 5 days a week, new shows debut of this program. We also have video programs. We are rolling out webinars, seminars, online courses, and all different types of supplemental and new resource material for you constantly. And I do ask that when you're on CourtneyAnderson.com, you'll see some of our corporate show sponsors. You'll see ads or affiliate links. Please, if you see those and you think, you know what, I do need that, I'm going to buy that, please click on those links on our show. It's really important that we are able to ramp up the infrastructure to be able to grow our resources and to support you and bring everything that we envision having available to you as quickly as possible. So please go ahead and support those show sponsors and make those purchases through our website. So I thought that this was an intriguing title. Why telling someone to think different or to think outside the box always fails. It's an intriguing one. We often don't like to use absolutes like always and never, because very rarely are they accurate. And it's also intriguing because I am a proud and open business educator. I teach in MBA programs, and I've taught business classes at universities since 1997. I love business. I practice business. I practice the joyful art of business, and it's something we talk about in all of our shows here in the community. But I really am. I'm a scholar. I'm a student. I'm an educator. I'm a practitioner. I love business. I'm a consultant and a corporate trainer. And these ideas, right, of think outside the box and think differently, they're very popular. So I put forward a show episode in our Management Magician series where we're telling our management community members, hey, don't do this. Don't tell someone to think outside the box and think different. It sounds contradictory to what we believe that we understand, and consulting and the management sciences and leadership development, strategic planning. I mean, this is what we hear this all the time. My goodness gracious. And I've been going out to client organizations doing consulting and corporate education and corporate training programs since either end of 1999 beginning of 2000. So it's been a while. I've done this all over the world, and in the States, and in Europe, and Australia, and in Asia, and in Africa, and my goodness gracious. How could it be failure to tell someone to think outside the box or think differently? This is really, popular. Let me dive right into the meat of why I'm making the argument I am. All right, here's the deal. We all know that there's a school of thought out there that makes the argument that you have to adapt. You the individual, and you, the collective organization. And that if you don't adapt, you're going to die. And not just figuratively die, but die. Like your business is going to cease to exist. You're not going to be a going concern. You're not going to have the revenue. You're not going to have the money to stay open because you didn't adapt. And when you look in business text for academic courses and also for just corporate development programs, they're just chock full of case studies, which makes sense. It's similar to what you would see in some analogous ways to any other profession, medical or law. You study what happened before, right? Give me a case, tell me the facts, help me think through it, and let me see what happened, so I can learn from it how to better make decisions, right? So, we look and say, oh my goodness, look at the organizations that didn't adapt when you had a transformation from agrarian and agricultural societies to manufacturing. Look at what happened when you had inventions like an internal combustion engine. An automobile became a mass market product. What happened to the horse and buggy drivers in that industry? And certainly, in the last couple of years, the perception that many people have, and could be accurate and it might be completely false, is that there's a perceived acceleration of change. Wow, the internet. Wow, smartphones. Wow, tablets. Wow, the Internet of Things. We're connected. I can have a student in Mumbai while I'm in Buenos Aires teaching a course, and we're in one class. I can have a client or a staff member, distributed workforce anywhere in the world. And so all of that I take part on a daily basis. And it's exciting, my opinion. Some argue that it's accelerated. Some argue it's not. It's just we perceive it's faster because, this is when we're alive. We'll see, right? And what I mean by that is we'll see what the future holds. We'll see depending on how long you and I live, whatever the hindsight 2020 tells us when we look back at this period. And because of so many changes, one of which is the entire management consulting field, which has changed dramatically, right? Standardization of work, increased efficiencies, data-based decision-making, all of this is relatively recent. We weren't doing this the way we do it and the scale that we do it previously, because we had more of a sort of a just-in-time business situation. You were a cobbler and somebody needed you to cobble something. They'd come to you and tell you, and you as an artisan and create it. It wasn't at the scale that we have now. Just as humans, our global population over 7 billion and counting. We did a show, and I encourage you to access that show. We talked about the billions of people that compete with you for jobs, right? Sort of the gap between the sort of desired full-time job with benefits globally and the numbers of people on this planet. And we based that off a book that was written talking about the coming war for jobs. So if you haven't looked at some of that data, look at it. So all that's to say that there's been this headlong rush into the idea that, okay, we have to adapt. Often as a result of seeing people who didn't adapt, people who ran organizations who didn't adapt, and then those organizations publicly and often in a sort of catastrophic way collapsing and all the fallout. So people look back and they say, oh my goodness, I saw what happened to Lehman Brothers, and I'm running like crazy to adapt. Or I saw what happened to other companies, and I'm running like crazy to adapt. Okay. Putting aside whether or not that's an actual reality or, again, whether it's just perception, that's at least a very common idea. And when you have organizations where the leadership puts pressure down the chain of command, we have to adapt. We have to innovate. We need new stuff. We need new products, we need new ideas, we need new marketing, old ideas. We need new penetration into different markets. We need to better understand different populations and cultures to be able to do that, right? Then people respond. The wonderful, beautiful thing about most organizations, what I love in strategic leadership, which is one of my primary areas of practice and advice and consulting, is, and most of the time, the system works the way it's supposed to. Most people want to do what you tell them to. They want to follow the rules. They want to get an attaboy. They want to get a pat on the back. They want to do, quote, a good job. They want your approval. And most of the time, it's amazing how functional this is. The challenge is when you have a system that's built for one thing, and it does that one thing, and then somebody decides, well, we needed to do something that's the opposite, the antithesis of what it's built to do, then you get problems. It's, all those sayings, right? How do you get a fish to ride a bicycle, right? It's hard. Fish don't ride bicycles. They need to be in water. Even if it's an underwater bicycle. They don't have appendages that permit them to ride a bicycle the way that a human would. And people talk about herding cats, right? Cats don't want to be herded. They're individuals. And all these are just sort of ways to express the idea, I can't fit something into an area that it doesn't belong. Like, it won't function there. So here's what my argument is. You build an organization, and at that part of the process where you're building an organization, those individuals who create, craft, and build it are innovators. Often they're labeled as entrepreneurs, but they're people who can literally take nothing. Like, there is no business. It doesn't exist. And they make up a name for it, and they decide what it's going to do, and they figure out how to apply in real life the steps necessary to make some kind of service or good. They figure out how to market it in some way, even if it's really rudimentary, so that people will pay for it. All of that is an immense amount of heavy lifting mentally. And I've shared in other programs. I've done a program where I talked about when I opened a law firm when I was in my 20s, and some of the challenges in that, and some of the fun of it, right? There's a certain type of mind that you can give the empty nothing and say, give me a business. And they can do it. They can just pull it out of air. It's out of their imagination, it's out of their experiences, it's out of their dreams, it's impacted by media and culture and their environment and their life and their beliefs. But there are people that do this. They do it all day, every day. And that's the dynamism of markets. It's so exciting, right? You have inventors who can invent things. But very few inventors actually can take that invention and have it be part of some sort of a business that makes money. That's a totally different skill. On a very small scale, I've spent my entire life as an adult building little things, little businesses, and loving it. I love the idea of not even a blank piece of paper, just nothing. What are you going to do? And even in this show, this vehicle, we're episode 200, right? The creation of this. There's nothing. Do we need a show? What kind of show? Is it going to be an audio show? Is it going to be video show? Is it going to be both? What's it going to be called? How are you going to record it? How are you going to distribute it? How are you going to promote it? I mean, all of this, there's so much heavy lifting. I like the heavy lifting part, and I've learned through analysis and a lot of the quizzes, when you do start looking at our Twitter and our blog, you'll see that I share a lot of announcements on unconventional jobs, like work from home or contracts you might have not thought of, or careers you maybe thought, I didn't know that was a career. I had no clue that existed. I post a lot of those, and I also post a lot of self-assessments, like quizzes about, what's your personality? Your leadership sort of preferences? How do you communicate? All types of different things. Because the better, the better we know ourselves, the more that we're able then to deploy that realistic assessment of who we are in ways that will benefit us and other people, organizations, and of course our communities. So I love creating stuff. I like building things, and I like systems. That makes me happy. Why I love that is, the chicken and the egg question. Is it genetic? Is it environment? Is it both? I ascribe to it's both. Now, what percentage it is, I don't have the answer to, but I think it's both. I think I was born sort of wired in some ways to like building things from nothing and like creating systems. And I think it's been reinforced, obviously, by my environment and my life experiences. And I had access to the ability to be able to do this, too, right? Which is just good fortune. Because I could have been born in a time period where, I was just not able to have access based on who I was or what family I was born into or what tribe or culture or whatever. So I know that's what makes me happy is building stuff. I also know, though, that the opposite skill, my language is clumsy, but what I'm saying is some people like to build something from nothing. And then other people like when something's already built to come in there and run it and make it awesome. And those are two different skills. And you see that with startups all the time. That whoever it was that was sort of the genesis of the business, they get it to a certain point. And then, of course, as it grows, this is one of the reasons why I like to have small organizations, because I don't want to grow to a big organization. I never have wanted that at all. I'm more of the lifestyle entrepreneur. I like to do enough so that I can, support myself and support my team members, but keep it small, because that's my plan. I mean, I don't want to build some huge big thing because it's a totally different investment and a different type of life. It's a different lifestyle, right? But with the startups, what we'll traditionally see is the story of that person who's sort of the creative force, or the original creative forces, and then they do, they kind of get it up to a certain point, and then especially as it gets bigger, because as it gets bigger, then you have so many more stakeholders, right? It's one thing when I have 10 team members. It's another thing if I have 10,000 team members, and if I have shareholders, and if I have investors. All these people have opinions and expectations and demands. And what you'll often see, again, at startup is that the people who create stuff really well, they don't do well just sort of managing stuff that's already built. And then usually they're replaced at some point, right? And often there's even language where you'll read in business media or case studies, and they'll say, well, we had to find professional executives. And in a way I always find that sort of insulting. But I understand and I support the idea. It's not the same skill set. The building it from your imagination is not the same skill set, or is it the same enjoyment for people who like it as running something that already exists and either it becoming more mature and continually more and more stakeholders. It's not the same skill set. And one of the core issues is that people who often enjoy building things and creating things out of nothing, they don't enjoy having something that's already there, because the thing that makes them happy and kind of turns them on intellectually is the building of it, the creation of the imagination part. When it already exists, they don't get to do that. And then to them, often it's not as enjoyable. Which is why this title of the show and my argument and my assertion is accurate. People who, quote, think different or think outside the box. And when you go to the show page on CourtneyAnderson.com for episode 200, you'll see I have a link to an article. Let me make sure I have the right year. From, I believe, 1995. And it's an article in Fast Company, which is a business periodical. And, I'm sorry, not 1995, 2005. I was close. 2005 is 10 years off. It's an article from 2005, and it's talking about this idea. It's entitled Outside the Box, the Inside Story. And then the title says, our debunking unit takes on the mother of all consultancies, the box and how to think outside of it. And I put the link on the show page, and there's some quotes. Let me look at some of these quotes right here, right now. So this is the idea, thinking outside the box, right? Okay. It says, some specimens of consultant speak are so cliche that they have long lost any real meaning and have turned into the conversational equivalent of an The most common of these may be the hoary exhortation to think outside the box. And it goes on to say, the phrase means something like think creatively or be original. And its origin is generally attributed to consultants in the 1970s and 1980s who tried to make clients feel inadequate by drawing 9 dots on a piece of paper and asking them to connect the dots without lifting their pen, using only 4 lines. All right. So obviously there's a certain point of view in this piece, but I think it's really important that we do continue, as we do in all of the programs, and we even have a whole series, focused on asking ourselves, are things that are sort of, out in our world as concepts, are they myths? Are they facts? I mean, how do we know? And I think it's important, this thing about thinking outside the box. I hear it so much. Well, obviously you're thinking, well, yeah, you hear it. You teach, graduate business students. You go out and do on-site consulting and corporate education training programs for organizations around the world. So yeah, you hear this stuff. Well, yeah, I'm not saying that I hear it more than I would if I worked, in a restaurant. What I'm saying is that it's a very popular concept, and I think sometimes when things are popular, we have a tendency to think, well, if it's popular, it must be true, and that's not necessarily accurate. And this source obviously was sort of poking at it, but I do want you to understand this. Look, people who are already thinking differently and thinking outside the box, let's just stick with thinking outside the box. People who already think outside the box, they're already doing it. The reason that this show is entitled what it is, right? That if you tell someone to think different or to think outside the box, it always fails, right? That's the title. Why this always fails. Here's the point. It's because you're telling them to do it. The reason it fails is because you told them to do it. You can't tell someone to think differently. They already either do think differently or they don't. And there's a very small group of people who think differently, but they've trained themselves because of their cultural enforcement conditioning not to tell you. I can't tell you to think differently. If you did think differently, you would already be doing it. And by definition, if I thought differently, you couldn't tell me how to think if I already did think differently. If I don't think differently, you're not going to be able to make me think differently by just telling me to do it. If I knew how to do it, I would already be doing it. The fact that I don't do it means I don't know how to do it, or I'm not built that way. This other concept, think differently, or think different. So I got to have a link on the show page, and where most of us are familiar with the idea of think different is a 1997 marketing piece from Apple. And so 1997, Apple has an ad campaign, and I've got a link here to an article in the show notes that's sort of talking about how, and it's a good link, so when you go through, all of the links are good, but when you go through, it's got both of the versions of this ad, this Apple Think Different ad campaign, the original one. It's got both of them on the sites that you link to, so you can just go look at them. And basically, it's an article saying how Steve Jobs, who at that time was in making the decisions at Apple, didn't want his own voice used in this ad. He wanted to have a professional actor, and they did have one. But both versions with his voice and with the professional actor are both on the website. You can look, compare, and you read about how Steve Jobs was mad or was displeased and didn't like his own voice. He felt like it would make him seem sort of like an egomaniac, potentially to the public. And then you can go, with your own eyes, look and see both versions. Okay, here's the deal. Now, it very simplified, and we did a show on the commencement speech, the well-known commencement speech Steve Jobs had given about where he was asking graduates of universities, to think different. He was asking them to stay hungry and stay foolish, but that we have that show, and I've got that we did, and I've got the link on the show page. The one thing I want you to think about is this, though. Somebody like a Steve Jobs, from what we've read of him, which is all I know, he already thought differently. And in fact, because he thought differently, it caused not necessarily super awesome outcomes all the time. In fact, he was fired from Apple. In his own interpretation, you could use different language, but the point is as we talked about earlier, right, the people who sort of come up with creating things out of imaginary don't necessarily always translate well to running something as it becomes more mature and ingrained. And my argument is that the people who already think differently and are assertive enough or confident enough or whatever combination of personal assessment, valuation they have on their own existence to speak up and tell you they think differently. Because, like I said, more people actually think differently, but they don't say it because they learn really early that it's sort of the tall poppy syndrome, right? If you stick up, above everybody else with some idea of awesome or innovation or let's try this, or you overachieve in many instances, which is, that word drives me to distraction. But what I'm saying is you deviate from the norm too much, then often you're cut down. And this happens in social groups. It happens in, sadly, families, and it definitely happens in organizations. So the huge conflict from an outsider, someone like myself who spent, like I said, from the 1990s through the time of this show, going around the world to all different types of organizations, from startups to huge, global, multinational, leading companies, right? I've worked with client organizations that literally have millions of employees. I mean, that's a huge number. So when you look at an organization that's existing, and then you tell the people that are in that existing organization that now they're supposed to be able to go out and imagine things out of thin air, it's not logical. The system was built by people who do imagine things. Now it already exists. So the people you brought in after it existed, and you asked them to manage it, to maintain it, to make it as efficient as possible, to hire and retain the best employees. Those people have totally different skill sets. That's why they do what they do, and they do it really well. Like I said at the outset, the system is working. The stress and the friction comes in, and the failure is when someone, and I don't totally understand exactly why this continues to happen. You go to that fish and you start yelling at them to ride that bicycle. And the fish is like, I can't ride a bicycle. I can't even be out of the water. I'll die. And then you say, well, I'll put the bicycle in the water. And they're like, all right, it's in here with me in my fish area, my tank or my fish pond or the ocean. But I don't have the physical makeup to utilize it. I'm not built that way. It's not how I do stuff. And then they keep yelling at them. No, I told you, right? Think different. And they're like, I am thinking differently. But you're asking, it's one thing to think differently. It's another thing you're asking me to be different. Not be what I am. Not do what I do well. Which doesn't make any sense because you hired me because I'm an excellent fish. And my point is, if you look, people who think differently or who think different or who think outside the box already are doing that. And they wouldn't be working in your organization as it already exists. Because most organizations, and this is supported by substantial data, are resistant to change. Exactly because that's what they should be, is resistant to change in a lot of ways. You want them to maintain something that exists. There's a ton of work that goes into maintenance. And you also want them, again, to hire and retain the best people. These maintenance and excelling within a defined organization is the opposite of defying the rules. They excel at maintenance because they adhere to the rules. When you go and you tell them they need to now not have the rules, throw the rules out and all this kind of garbage, then it's the most illogical thing ever. And it is you telling them to go get that fish out of the water and put it on that bicycle. And then people are really frustrated and say, well, I don't understand why they're not innovating more. I don't understand. And it's like, well, if you want an innovator, if you want a person who thinks differently or who thinks different or who thinks outside the box, right? You have to go hire them. They already exist exactly as they are. It works both ways. We said earlier in the show that sort of very common narrative. The people who started their organization, they get to a certain point and now they bring in the professional managers and executives. That's very common. We all, like I said, sometimes I don't like the language that's used, but we all sort of recognize that as a very standard narrative. And most of us recognize the benefit of that, right? And in some of these more recent stories where the founders have been relatively young, age is all relative, then you say, oh, okay, well, so-and-so started this, and they were, a teenager, and they got to a certain point, and now even, they were maybe in their 20s at that point, and we brought in somebody who's, was 40 and had decades of experience. Now, I'm against the age discussion because I find it personally offensive and inaccurate and not helpful, but I do understand why it's so popular because you think, well, they were just a kid. Well, yeah, they were a kid, but they figured out how to do this. Came with something, right? They started selling it. I don't care if it was in their dorm room. I don't care if it was in their mom's garage. I don't care if it was, whatever, but they did it. I do accept, though, because the reality is that not many people who love the creation part also want to manage an existing thing. They want to keep making new things. So you'll see serial entrepreneurs, right? Because, I built that and I built it and now, somebody else is managing it and I still have an ownership share, or I sold it and now I built this other thing, because the building is the thing that they like. That's kind of what turns them on intellectually. So if you take it away from them, they often can function and do the behavior of management. It just isn't the thing that makes them the happiest. And if you have somebody that doesn't have a financial reason, like they don't need the money, right? Then they're not going to do something that makes them unhappy. I argue in our entire everything that we do, Practicing the Joyful Art of Business and all of our series and this series, Magic Magicians, and all of our series, that nobody should do things that they don't want to do that make them miserable for the rest of their lives. That we should find, create, and craft solutions so that we can transition to stuff that we may not love it, but at least, we like it. We don't hate it. We're not miserable, right? For the rest of our lives. Almost all of us have spent some times in our lives where we did stuff we didn't love or maybe that we hated, but we were learning or growing, or it was just a transition in life to the next step. But it's not a destination where we just sit somewhere miserable and then we complain for 60 years and then our life is over and we were never happy. So it's not offensive to acknowledge that they're different skills. Someone who thinks different they already do that. Someone who thinks outside the box already does that. And that's what they're out and about doing. When I say that the manager who goes and tells somebody, think different or think outside the box, it's such a contradiction. I can't tell you how to think if you already think different. By definition, I can't tell somebody who thinks differently how to think because they already weren't listening to me. They're not, somebody who thinks different and thinks outside the box isn't in my system. Because if my system if my system is built on maintenance and getting the organization to optimal efficiency, optimal market penetration, and these types of things, then that's not a place where somebody who thinks different would have come and stayed, because they already wouldn't have been here. Because this is a maintenance place. People who are builders and creators wouldn't be in that place. Just by nature of the beast. Unless they were unhappy. So when you go get somebody who's really good at being maintenance, penetrating new markets, we have great new advertising, where our shareholders are at least not revolting and overall are generically pleased, and they're doing a great job at maintenance. They are doing everything within that system, and they're constantly engage in continuous improvement. And continuous improvement doesn't mean that you never make any changes. Of course, you're constantly making changes. Like I said, new ads, new research, a new market. It's just that they're not building something from scratch. There already is something that exists, and what they're doing is improving it. That's very different from saying to somebody, hey, here's air. There's nothing. Now go build me, come up with a name, come up with a business, come up with a good or a service, and let's start the whole thing. That's a totally different skill set. And there are many people who can do both, but there are not many people who enjoy both as much. So there are some people who, they really enjoy the thing that already exists. Let me get in there now and make it awesome. There are other people who are like, I don't want anything to exist. I like going through all of the unknown and the totally, 100% risk of failure and the creation. And I think our failure to understand this and apply this into our business practices is what leads to so many preventable problems. From interpersonal relationships, friction, office politics that are toxic, really high turnover, poor morale, low employee engagement, lawsuits. It's all stemming from this. We're not just looking and recognizing that we all are different individuals and we have different needs. And when you have somebody that does something really well, great. To come to somebody who does something really well and then say to them, yeah, you're a great fish, but I need you now to go ride a bicycle, and then be mad that they didn't innovate or they didn't think outside the box the way you wanted, is just ludicrous. Here's what I'm basing a lot of this on. What is thinking? Now, we did a show a while ago, so this is episode 200. We did a show really early on, asking how many thoughts do we think a day? And the research I had at a leading university in California was we think about 70,000 thoughts a day. So that was a quantity question. Now the quality question, how we think, the critical thinking issue. And we did another show in the Management Magician series talking about, do you want a critical thinking employee or an obedient employee? Because my argument is that roughly those are two different polar opposite groups. Critical thinkers control their own thinking. Obedient people are obedient to your thinking. That's why people who are obedient do really well in systems, because the system's already defined. And they do an excellent job of maintaining the system, of monitoring the system, and they can grow the system to a certain degree through continuous improvement. But they're not going to destroy the system. They're obedient. The people who don't care about that you have a system and that they don't at all care about what you think, they think their own thoughts, they control their own thoughts, they're not obedient. That's the problem. That's why I said earlier, the people who you want that are going to think outside the box aren't in your organization. And what I mean is, if you radically, and this happens, where an organization, oh my goodness, we made physical camera film. Uh-oh, we're in deep trouble. Technology has changed, and people with some sort of thing, a smartphone, are taking pictures. We're in deep trouble. We better totally figure out something else to do, or we're not going to exist. When you get to that level, you need somebody who's the kind of person who can think of stuff out of the air. Because the people who were doing really well, to the best of their ability, before these external forces changed everything, that they were like, we're doing a great job. We sell physical camera film. It's great. The problem is when you take that away from them, they're people who operate within systems. Without a system, what do? And I'm going to make this analogy because I had a recent discussion and about journalism and print media and things of that nature. My argument is that in journalism and print media, content was king, or it should have been. Now, you had some situations where there was a monopoly on distribution networks. So if people wanted to know what was going on, there was maybe one newspaper or outlet, and that's kind of what they had to watch. So that necessarily didn't mean that there was competition for content, the best content, or the best market reach. It just meant that there was nobody else there that did anything. So when you have a monopoly, it's easier to sort of become complacent. When you opened up the technology and it went from, hey, I was a monopoly in this one city in Australia, to now, people can go on the internet and get news from anywhere in the world. Now you're competing in a way with kind of everybody at a certain extent. Now you should have some resources about that one little city that are only going to apply to that one little small geographic region that's particularly interested in it for most stuff. But my point is, the people who did really well in the defined mechanism of gathering news will still continue to do really well at gathering news. The challenge, though, is when you have so much competition for viewers, you need to reimagine some additional ancillary or, in some ways, replacement mechanism so that you can make money. And when you go and you yell at the people who are really good at what they've been doing, the legacy business, to go think of outside the box and figure it out, how on earth are they supposed to do that? If it's somebody who has never in their entire life built a business from scratch, and then when I say yell, I actually was going to say I just meant figuratively, but I actually do mean literally, because I've actually witnessed in case studies and certainly in courtrooms, you want to see when people are under huge amounts of pressure, and of course it's public record when people are sued and businesses, people have to testify. They do scream because people start, everybody wants to point fingers of why this thing failed and fell apart. And my point is simply that often it's a misunderstanding of this basic show topic. The people who think different and think outside the box are already doing that thing, and most likely they're not somebody that you manage because you already are an existing entity. So what you have to do if you need someone to think different and think outside the box, you have to go get them. You have to go hire them. You may hire them as an employee. You may hire them as a consultant or a contractor or vendor, but you're going to have to hire them because they already are doing that stuff. You're not going to transform the person who does system maintenance and continuous improvement and then expect them to go out and do system development and design. They're two different, again, skills. And I said that earlier we did the show about how many, quantity, how many thoughts. All right, somewhere around 70,000 according to that data source, which you can investigate yourself through the show links. The quantity is that issue. The quality is how you think, and that's where the critical thinking comes in. So look on the show page. We did the show about critical thinking or obedient employee, and I made the argument those are two different things. People who are really obedient and doing great jobs at that aren't going to be critical thinkers because part of it, I believe, is sort of natural. So that's sort of the genetic part. The other part of it is your environment. If you were raised in an environment where every time you had a different idea, you were chastised and berated and you were in trouble, right? You're not following the rules. You got to follow the rules. Why are you not following the rules? And that's what you get in a lot of primary school and secondary school. You get that in a lot of societies around the world where you teach people from a really young age, then absolutely don't think different. Follow the rule. Obey. And when you teach people to do that and you spend decades, you get somebody that's 20 years old and they've spent 2 decades, their entire life, being reinforced over and over again, obey, 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 then, you're going to get some people who are like, that's what I do. And then you want to turn around to that same person and say, oh, forget obey. Toss obey out. I want you to go think different. Of course, you're going to throw the system into chaos, but you're going to throw the individual into chaos. And here. This is from the United States military, which definitely has spent a lot of resources, and I'm sure has immense resources, on research, on all kinds of things. But one of the things that they research, obviously, is humans, right? Humans that work in the military, humans in terms of behavior, right? Their internal humans and humans in external organizations or parts of the world, how they would behave, predictive analysis, things, this type of stuff. So this is the show note content that I'm reading now, but it was also, I included it in that earlier show when we asked in our management position series, do you want a critical thinking staff or do you want people who obey? Critical thinking or obey. You got to pick. You can't have both, and you can't have one person that's doing both. So from the U.S. military, they defined critical thinking as owning your own thoughts. So somebody who's a critical thinker, they own their own thoughts. Someone who's not a critical thinker, the people who obey, that do well within systems, then the thoughts come from an external source. The organization, the manager, the boss. They're told what to do. They didn't think that up. They're told what to do, and then they do, and they do it really well. And that's what in the majority of populations, that's what most people do is obey because you have to, because the numbers to support the infrastructure of these huge organizations, or you need a lot more people who obey and obey well, which is part of maintenance, which is part of reinforcing the culture. You need far more numbers of those than you'll need the people that go and create stuff out of thin air. At least that's been historically what's happened. As we move into what's often referred to as the knowledge economy, there's apprehension that we're going to need more and more people to do the thinking part, which requires you to disavow other people's thoughts and ideas and not obey. The problem is, where do you get those people if you have systems that are built to teach people to obey? So this is from the U.S. military, and I love this quote because I think it crystallizes exactly what this topic is about. That again, we talked about it and did a different way in the other show when we talked about critical thinking, obedience, but now I really want to bring this home and let's look and see. So the military is trying to figure out. Now again, the military, you would think, has hundreds of thousands of team members, and obedience is a big part of that culture. I need you to obey, right? But they also need people who are innovative and can think of stuff that doesn't exist. And part of the question, my interpretation, big picture, is trying to figure out, can I sort of transform somebody who's one of my existing people within my existing structure and have them start thinking of new things? Strategy, tools, practices, analysis, whatever. So here we go. Here's this quote from the U.S. military, and it's on the show page. Okay. Critical thinking can't just be switched on. It may be asking too much of people who have been nurtured and rewarded in an environment where, as one soldier turned civil servant put it, The lines are your friends. It's safe within the lines. Stay within the lines. To suddenly change their thinking habits, therefore, we have to provide students an environment where thinking skills can be learned and then practiced in realistic situations that are otherwise safe and supportive. So, bottom line, and I love that quote from the soldier turned civil servant. That's the expression of that person who is saying, I'm a great fish, let me just be a fish. And look at that again. It says, the lines are your friends. It's safe within the lines. Stay within the lines. Do you see that? Somebody who is been maybe already sort of genetically predisposed, that I'm not going to argue with you, and or been in an environment where they definitely were taught and conditioned. You stay within the lines. Follow the rule. And they do that, and they do it well, and they exceed, and they get pride in themselves, and they feel good about it. And now you want to turn around and tell somebody there are no lines at all. I took away all the lines. There's not a single line. Figure it out. Of course that person is frightened. And the thing that the full link to the military information really expresses well is it's unfair for an organization to tell the person, okay, there are no lines. Now get out there, disobey, come up with something totally radical. And then when people do that in most organizations that already exist, you know what happens? That they're berated. Because they did exactly what... Here's the thing. It's a contradiction itself to tell them to not have a line and to think different. If they already thought different, they would be doing it. And the fact that they're listening to what you're telling them to do means they don't think different. It means that their critical thinking skills are less developed. Somebody who has really high-level critical thinking skills already is thinking. And guess who's in charge of what they think they are? So when you tell them either to stay in the line or don't stay in the line, they really don't care. Now, people who can have really high-developed critical thinking skills may be in organizations. Often, it might be a legacy thing that they got in the organization. And if they like what they do enough, right, their specific individual area of work, they sometimes will pretty contentedly stay in an organization as long as they're allowed to do what they do, because that's what makes them happy. When you go to them and start telling them what to do beyond that, here's the deal. They weren't listening to you anyway. The critical thinkers might be in your organization, and like I said, in small numbers, and it's only because their own needs are met. They're not here because of obedience or because of what you think or your approval or any of that. They don't care. It's not that they are arrogant. What it means is they are making their own decisions. So if they're staying in your organization, it's because it works for them, irrespective of whatever you say. It might be as a side effect that it works for them, that it looks like they're just doing what you want them to do, but what they're really doing is what they want. And if what they want sort of fits within your bigger picture, then they can be happy and contented, for a career. It's only when you come and you abut that and you try to either change the thing that makes them happy, because the deal is they weren't there for you. They weren't there to obey. They just happened to be doing what they liked, and it allowed them to do that within your bigger framework. And as long as you didn't intrude on what made them happy, they'll go, about their business, please. It's when you come and you try to take it away from them that you're going to learn really quickly that they weren't obeying you to begin with. You just had an alignment of interests. And so even in that situation, it's not going to benefit you or help you to sort of expose them and to force them outside of what it is they want to do. They already have been thinking different. They've already been thinking outside the box. And they also don't want to get into conflict with you, which is the biggest problem, which I said the military longer link will talk to you about. Here's the thing. Most people who come from cultures that value obedience know that that's value. Whether or not they agree with it is not important, but they do know it's a value. They know it's highly valued because they're not unaware of the consequences of the people who don't obey, right? The punishment. They may choose to look like they're obeying simply because it fits their own needs and their own needs are met. But they really aren't making decisions based on what you think at all. They're making decisions based on what you want. Like I said, you just happen to have an alignment of interests. If you go to them and say, now I want you to go take on a high-risk thing by thinking different and thinking outside the box, and they already know that your culture is going to decimate whoever it is that steps up and takes a risk, they're not going to do it at all. Especially because, here's the thing, they're not obeying you. They weren't obeying you before, and they're not going to obey you now. And they're not going to go and take away the things they do like, whatever, steady paycheck or adventure or the type of work they do or whatever it is that's in alignment with their interests. They are really savvy. And they completely understand that if they were to obey you and now, reveal the fact that they think different to the whole organization, that the consequence of that is going to be absolute disaster to them personally. Because they know that culture, and they know that culture does not support and has not supported and will not support them thinking different. That's why they already know that. They totally aren't going to do it. Most of the time, they won't even reveal. Most managers who are not management magicians don't even know who their critical thinkers are because they're not adept enough at reading people and understanding what's really happening. And they're thinking, oh, those people are so obedient. They're not obedient at all. They just have a really strong alignment. And what works for them happens to be working within your organization, and they don't even really notice the managers at all because to them, they're mostly irrelevant. They're following their own thoughts and ideas, and they will not reveal themselves. They're not going to step up into those types of cultures and be the one to say, oh, I really am someone who thinks outside the box, because they know it's going to take away all the things that are working for them. And to what benefit? None. Your praise is temporarily for them, taking that risk isn't worth anything to them because they're not obeying you to begin with. So this is the environment that the management, especially the non-management magician, is in. It's sort of the suboptimal organization. Suboptimal organizations, they're inefficient. They're filled with people who don't want to work there and really could care less. They often are also filled with people with really poor skill levels. But it's a good place for somebody who's a critical thinker and isn't really that invested in the work to hide and to get almost, no stress at all and get their whatever it is that they want. So if it's a work assignment and they're like, I love working out in nature, and that job lets them work in nature, it's perfect for them. And if it's a suboptimal organization, it's great because nobody ever asks any questions or pays attention to anything. It might be that because there's a lot of incompetence, they can do just a little bit of competence, and they'll be sort of invaluable, and people will let them do what they want. So that'll work for them. But they're never ever going to jeopardize what's working for them and losing the opportunity to work outside, the opportunity to get that paycheck or those benefits or whatever it is. They're not going to jeopardize that behind some silliness, trying to obey you to step up and reveal that they're someone who thinks outside the box. It would only hurt them. And they've been around long enough to know that that's not at all going to work. You may, not a management magician, but someone who's not a management magician. I've seen this all the time, and you see it in case studies. They're like, oh, come on, team. It's the time. This is a whole new initiative. It's a new day. We're totally changing, and you got to step up. And then people, unless that's like your first time at the rodeo and you believe it, but somebody who's been around knows. Those are the same people who've been here. There's no way they're going to do this. Most people who think different, that hide in big organizations, they will have, in really tiny, subtle ways, have tested the waters to see if there's any opportunity for them to express, these novel ideas. They'll have done it in little ways. So they'll have gone, maybe 8 years ago, they went to some supervisor and were like, hey, I saw that we were, having something on the agenda about the way that we process the claims, and I had a suggestion that we, try this. And then when they got the feedback they expected, which was like, oh, I really think that's interesting, but I'm just gonna, take that under advisement. Why don't you go ahead, just back to what you do? Once they see that the people through their behavior don't really want to change, they're not going to give them any more ideas. That's why they don't do it. Now, often these people will have really exciting, hobbies, or sometimes even their own side small businesses where they express all their real ideas. But they're not going to share it with that organization because they will have it's 99.9% of the time, they will have tested the waters much earlier to see if there was any possible potential for them to truly show that real, true side of them at their organization. And then when they were rebuffed, they learned not to do it because it wasn't what people wanted. So then they just kept all that stuff to themselves, or they'll deploy it somewhere else in their life, but they're not going to share it with your organization. So when the organization goes to them and has the audacity to think, I can tell you how to think, they miss the whole point. The point is that people who think different and think outside the box, which means they're critical thinkers, they already are in charge of their thoughts. You weren't telling them what to do to begin with. You certainly can't tell them what to do now. Conversely, the people who are obedient, they just are going to do whatever you tell them. And that's where I think it's really sad. And that's usually who gets burned in these types of things where, when I say failure, of course the organization, whatever lip service they gave to change, which the people who work there, who are critical thinkers, know they weren't serious about. So the organization's hurt, when I say failure, but the individuals who are hurt are the obedient individual. See, the obedient individual, when you go to them and you say, okay, it's time to think outside the box, they really are trying. They're the ones who, when they had those little dots and they were told to use, the 4 lines and they were hysterical, they probably, some people, had a nervous breakdown because they couldn't figure it out and they wanted to obey, and you told them to obey, and they were trying so hard. Because that's what they do, is obey. So you tell them, think different. All right, tell me what it is. What do I do to think different? And they're, everything that you tell them, they're doing. The problem, of course, is the fact that you told it to them means, by definition, that they're not thinking different. They're just doing what you said, which is not thinking different because it's just regurgitating your thoughts. But they will try they will do everything in their power and beyond. And then here's the other thing. They will have such a crushing blow to their self-esteem and their pride when they feel like they cannot do it. Now, the reality is they can't do it. It's a trick question. You go to them, they excel at doing what you tell them. And then you say to them, now go do what I tell you, which is to not do what I tell you. But you don't tell them what it is. Which is why I read that quote again, that emphasis. Remember that soldier turned civilian servant. He said, the lines are my friends. It's safer than the line. You tell me there's no line, what am I supposed to do? I don't even know. I can't even function in a world like that. And the thing is, they will hurt themselves mentally, sometimes physically, to exhaustion, trying to figure out what it is you mean, and they don't know. And it hurts them because their pride comes from being very obedient and doing a good job in that area. And now you set them up to fail at this evil, I hate to use the word, but it really is, trick question. Think different. Well, what does that mean? I'm someone that you have to tell me what to think. I'm an obedient person, at least in this setting. So all that's to say this. There are people who do think different and who think outside the box. Some of them may be in your organization if it's a mature, large organization. And by large, I mean like anything over, 50 people or 20. I mean, it could be 20 people. But the bigger the organization, the more they'll hide. When it's really small, it's hard for them to hide. Because then they have to talk to people or interact with people, and people start to realize, hey, how did you think of that? Or how did you figure that out? And it makes them stand out. It's too hard to blend in. But when the bigger the organization, they can blend in. And often, like I said, you'll have a really contented critical thinker who maximized that big, mature organization to get exactly what they wanted out of it. It was a work that aligned with their individual plans and thoughts, and it's a win-win. And when you go and start having all these initiatives, oh, come on, we're going to think different, think outside the box. The people who already are in your group that do that, they know that you don't mean it because it's the same person. It's you. You're the one, either you individually or your administration or your leadership or the guy before you who said the same thing. When they did do a little version to test and see how open people really were to innovation or change or thinking different, they were rebuffed. So they know what the deal is. So they're not going to speak up because they're usually really savvy. Right? The people who do speak up, oh, okay, yeah, all right, we'll do it. What do you want? We'll think outside the box, we'll think different, and they really will try like everything they can to meet your needs. The problem is you have to be the one to tell them what to do because you are the one that they follow. And it's just cruel. Again, I use that word evil, and maybe it was a bit dramatic and it was for effect, but I really want you to understand the consequence of this. And go back to that military source. Critical thinking can't just be switched on or off. It is. If the military could have figured out how to do this, they would be doing it. By definition, if you're obeying me and following me, you're not able to go out and defy my order. They're two different groups. So for an organization who's like, oh, okay, we really do need to change. We were making camera film, physical camera film, we were in deep trouble. We have external pressures, and we're not going to be able to sustain what we've been doing. All right, then you need to get people who already think different and think outside the box, and then you can bring them in and hope they'll share the knowledge with you that you need. But you need to then be able to listen and let them do what they do. What often will happen is this: the people who manage existing structures really well, again, it makes them incredibly uncomfortable when you come and you want to throw things that are their lines that make them safe and throw those away. And people give lip service, oh yeah, we're totally on board from the top down, but they really aren't, because they also know this: the risk in change is going to exceed, at least individually, the risk in staying the course. And they know that. Especially the higher level managers and executives, they totally know that. Yeah, the company may go out of business if you don't make dramatic changes, but they're already well off. They already make a lot of money. They may have a great contract. So if it does go out of business, or you're going to have even a softer landing with more money, no golden parachute. So it'll be sad for them if it fails. But they also know that if they do this sort of bold, reimagined thing that the people who think differently and outside the box have shared with them, that it risks embarrassment, right? Public shame and failure. And they don't want to put their name on that. What they'll often do is say, oh yeah, I'm totally behind you, I'm totally supportive, but they want to put your name on it. The great thing is, if you're an external consultant or a person like that, often you don't mind. That's what, you'll give them cover, you'll let them hide behind your name. But if you don't have the power to implement all the steps that need to be done and make the changes really stick and be part of the culture, then it'll fail. In other words, somebody who has that large authority where people will obey them has to be the one to give the order. The external consultant or the change agent or whatever who's in there is giving information, but they're not obeyed. The people don't obey them. They only obey their established hierarchy and leaders. And if the established hierarchy and leaders aren't behind forcing them to change their behavior to the new obedience rules, then they won't do it. They'll say they'll do it, but everybody's just giving lip service. And people can read their leaders really well. And they don't want to embarrass their leader. They don't want their leader on the business media saying how idiotic this stupid plan to go from one service to another was, and what a disaster it was, and how goofy it was. That's okay if the consultant is, or someone they don't have a vested interest in. But they're very loyal to the system. That's why I said at the outset of this show, the system works. You train people, you give them reinforcement. They will continue to do everything in their power to sort of maintain the status quo. They can change, and here's the way it'll happen, and it's why it's so rare, and that's why the business media repeats the same story over and over again. And that's why in business curriculum, in your academic and in your corporate development programs, you see the same stories, because there are very few examples where this works, where you have somebody who does have the ability to lead and their people obey them, and who also has the ability to accept the type of total risk involved with substantive and dramatic change. It's really rare. So when it happens, that's why those people usually are lauded and talked about and publicly admired, because it's just such a rare thing to happen. Most people who are really good at leadership in terms of getting people to obey them, their egos don't allow them to let somebody else then turn around and make all these decisions. All the new ideas. They want the credit. And that's part of one of the huge obstacles to this. So the reality is that our show today, episode 200 of Solutions with Courtney Anderson, made a bold assertion. And I did my level best in the time frame of this program to try to share my perspective on why telling someone to think different or to think outside the box always fails. To actually have change that works, you're going to need a combination of the skill set of the people who build things, systems builders and imaginers, and working with people who maintain and do continuous improvement. And you're going to have the removal of these usually really deeply ingrained interpersonal issues like ego, credit, attention. And you're going to have that, and I mean rare, like a unicorn rare, where somebody's high enough in a leadership hierarchy that they have really strong obedience, and yet they also are going to be open enough to risk and failure and humiliation. And when you find that, then yeah, you're going to get that collaboration. Or you're going to get what you usually get are mergers and ventures, right? Where the organization tries to bring in or acquire another organization that has what they need. Because it's easier to buy something that exists that's already sort of doing the thing differently than it is for you to try to build it or change your people over to that. But in any event, that's what makes part of this dynamic, even though I kind of beg people in this program not to do this, to just at least on your own little corner of the world, stop it. Like, don't tell people who are critical thinkers to not be, or don't tell people who are not critical thinkers to be. Just find critical thinkers. And then you have to have an environment where you really are going to let them do what they do. If you're not, then it won't work, and they will walk. The critical thinker, remember, they're not there for you. They're not obeying you at all. It may look like it. It's just because you're in alignment of interest. And the moment the critical thinker is like, it's not working, they will go. They will bail. Because all the things that people who care about obedience, that keep them in a place. Oh, what do people think of me? Am I not good enough? I'll be embarrassed. The critical thinker doesn't think any of that. Because that's not how they make decisions. They make decisions based on what they think. So when they get to a point where it's like, this isn't working, they're gone. That's why they're hard to retain. And when you look at these organizations, and they're usually young organizations, what they'll do is go find a whole bunch of critical thinkers, and then they'll just let them do their thing. So the hierarchy, the micromanaging, all this kind of stuff, you don't see it because the people who are in charge of their own thoughts won't tolerate it. And if they're in a place and it was working for them, and then people wanted to make changes and take away what the autonomy and what the space they needed to, follow their own thoughts, they'll just go. And they'll do it even if it economically or, professionally hurts them, because they're not making decisions based on that stuff. They don't really care about that. They care about, their own ideas and their own measurement of what kind of turns them on intellectually. And they're not going to tolerate being in a situation for a long time that's not working for them. Because they don't care what you think. They don't care what the neighbor thinks. They don't care if everybody else thinks you're an idiot or how goofy it is that they, left. They're going to follow their own ideas because that's what they were doing the whole time. So those are your options. Either create a space from the beginning where you let the critical thinkers do their thing. Remember, they're their own worst critic. They're your superstars. They're hyper motivated, incredibly self-disciplined, and really creative. So if you give them the space and give them some resources and support, they're going to give you untold, advantages and innovations. But you have to give them that ability to trust that they can show you their special skills. If you don't, then they'll either hide and blend in and not do anything to help your organization, and then they'll just leave if it gets too difficult for them to get whatever it was that was working out of it. On the other hand, all your obedient people, that's who gets stuff done. That's who maintains, that's who monitors, that's who evaluates, that's who that's the numbers you need of those types of personalities are incredibly high. So just let them keep doing that. And the really easy way is, when you separate this and understand it, once you do get whatever the new practice or policy or plan is, then all you have to do, this is so simple, is go to whoever entity it is that the obedient people are following, right? Because that's what turns them on. Oh, I did a good job. They were proud of me. They thought I did a good job, whatever. So all you have to do is take the knowledge from the critical thinkers, which is either an internal organizational section that you let have free reign, or it's some external organization that you sort of bought from them the knowledge. But then you have to have whoever it is inside your organization who all your obedient people are following, that person, again, you got to hope that you just sort of hit the lottery with that person who has enough of a self-esteem and their ego is small enough that they'll take on risk. And then you just import the ideas and this innovation to them, and then most of them are going to want to put their own, sort of blueprint on it if they think that it might, work, so that they can sort of get credit for it, which to me is irrelevant. If that's what makes them happy, fine. But if they can really honestly get behind it and see where it'll benefit them, like make them more super awesome, then all their followers will just follow them. All the people who obey want to do is stay in the lines. And they trust whoever it is that they've been following at some level. Otherwise, they wouldn't stay. If the obedient people get with the situation where they can't even trust the lines, it's too chaotic for them, they will leave. It just takes them a lot longer. They'll tolerate a lot more distressed than somebody who's a critical thinker, but they will eventually have to go because they don't even have lines to follow. They have to have lines to follow. So if the system is set up correctly, so you get from your critical thinkers, this information and action, and then the top person or entity that the followers are obeying gives them new instructions. Hey, the new instructions are going to do this, and really means it, then they'll do it happily, quickly, and efficiently. They're not opposed to change, they're just opposed to failing, and they only feel like they're going to fail if they're not really sure what they're supposed to do. So if their suspicion is that the change isn't really supported, people are just giving it lip service, they won't do it. It's not because they're change resistant. It's just, people who obey are obedient. So they don't really, it's comfortable for them. Whatever it is you tell them to do, we're in the military, we're going to march this way. Okay, we march that way. No, we're going to march that way. Okay, we march that way. They're comfortable as long as they can follow. The reason they get uncomfortable when you have these change initiatives and everything is because it's chaotic usually. And they can read all the behavioral cues from their leader that they're following and know that person really isn't sold on this. And that's when they get nervous, and that's when you'll see them do is hold on to the legacy behavior because their belief is that's really what I'm supposed to do. And they're not going to change until they absolutely are comfortable and understand that that's where we're going. And then they trust whoever it is that they're obeying. Which if you do that, then they immediately will follow. They don't really care if we're going that direction or this direction. They care and they'll have ideas and stuff, but they're following. They'll go where they're led as long as they believe that that's really what they're supposed to do. It's when they're suspicious that they're not supposed to really be doing that, and they get conflicting information. And a person who's obedient can't handle that conflict because they don't know what to do with it. They can't process it. Remember that quote again from that soldier, right? Turns to the civil servant. It's safe within the lines. That's where they need to be. They need rules. If you change the rule, that's fine with them, as long as it's a rule. It's only when you have chaos and you have a lack of trust, and they suspect that you really don't mean what you say in terms of what rule you want them to obey. That's when you get chaos, and they won't be comfortable. But overall, that big picture framework is exactly as I shared with it. You got to go out and get those who think different or think outside the box. They already exist. They're already doing it. If they're hidden in your organization, the only way they'll show themselves is if they witness a sustained practice of change and leadership, where they'll make another little test to see what the hey, I have a suggestion for how we do the claims. And, oh, really? Oh, my goodness, that's a great idea. Why didn't we do this earlier? I'm going to get on this right now. Let's get this done in 3 days, right? If they saw that, then they will start to give you more and more of their own ideas. But they'll only do it when there's a dramatic change, usually in personnel at the top, who are able then to like I said, have a lower, smaller ego and have more of a tolerance for risk. But this system is actually really awesome. Like I said, it works. You just got to get everybody in the right place. The fish is not going to be on the bicycle successfully riding the bicycle. They're going to be in the water. And people who ride the bicycle outside of the water are going to be doing that. And as long as you let everybody do their thing, they'll do it happily. It's only when you try to mix the group and then you have really poor leadership who doesn't see this and refuses, and I do mean refuse. I've seen and read and studied so many awful, depressing examples. Somebody who never should have been in any leadership position because they don't have the ability to do it. The ego thing, the narcissism, short-sighted, lack of creativity and intellectual curiosity, and you get just disastrous outcomes. But the beauty of it is when you just set it up like this, get my players, got my Think Different and my Think Outside the Box group, they're doing what they do, they're doing their thing, got my Obedient group, they're doing their thing, and then all I got to do is get that collaboration at the top senior level of actual behavior of, okay, change, I believe in it, we're doing it. And then if the top of that chain of obedient command conveys that to the people who obey them, they'll do it in a heartbeat. Okay, we're going marching that way, we'll just go march this way, that's fine. They're not stressed out about it. It's only, again, when there's conflict, when they don't really know what to do, where the lines are, when you move the lines but you don't tell them what or why or how, that's when you get all these problems. So all that is my very optimistic and happy and grateful opportunity to continue to do teaching and corporate education programs and some consulting on these topics, because this is it. The system is built and it works most of the time exactly like it's supposed to. It's only when people refuse to see what the system is and refuse to understand how the different roles are set up that you get problems. But that's something that unfortunately happens more often than I would hope. So that's why we did the program, and that's why I'm out and about all over the world working with organizations to help fix these misunderstandings so we can get things functioning and everybody doing their thing. The Think Different group is over there thinking different. They're doing their thing. Woo, I got autonomy. I'm doing things. I'm feeling it. And then you got your obedient people. They're doing it. I'm maintaining. I got continuous improvement. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. I feel good about myself. And then you got your executive and your managers. I'm leading, but I have enough of those rare qualities where I'm enough of a well, it's the truth. I'm enough of a risk taker. And my self-esteem is high enough that I'm willing to go out there and follow somebody else's ideas, and B, to risk that it'll be a disaster. And when you get that, you get magic. But as we said earlier, we talked about that Think Different, and everyone thinks about Steve Jobs, and certainly toward the end of his life, all these really great products. And the market response was incredible. But the thing is, Steve Jobs was already so focused on Think Different and Think Outside the Box, he was fired. He was willing to go all the way. Like I said, they're following their own path to begin with. If there's an alignment of interest, they'll look like they're on board with you, but they really are just doing their own thing, and it happened that it matches what you want to do, and then it's a win-win. But most people who are managers, non-manager magicians, and executives who are not elite executives, they would never risk being fired. They never would do that. They would have just swallowed whatever idea they had and continued to obey because they would have been too embarrassed. They would have felt that everybody would have ridiculed them. They've been humiliated. They wouldn't risk it. The people who already are wired that think differently, they understand those bad things happen, but they can't tolerate. They honestly, again, the research is ongoing, but they cannot tolerate not following their own principles. Because remember, their instructions are coming from themselves. And they will go all the way to failure, to fired, to bankrupt. They will go all the way. And there are so few people like that. Which makes sense, right? The majority of people, they're good, they're communicators, they're charismatic, they lead, but they're not going to risk everything like that. And what you need, obviously, is somebody who's got enough of a devotion to risking it all, to let in new ideas, to let those who think different and those who think outside the box have an impact. But it's rare to see that, and it's just because most people in positions feel like I worked 30 years to get in this position, and I have bills and stuff, and I'm not going to risk it all. So they'll do everything they can to protect their own reputation. They're obsessed with how other people think about it and all this kind of stuff, and that will trump they do have a desire, to change. Like, they see it, but they can't overcome their own internal issues with self-esteem and pride and risk aversion. And unless they're, with counselors and professionals who can, dig deep into their psyche and potentially maybe understand and work with them through, really intensive ongoing treatment, you're not going to be able to get something different from them. So I love all of this content. I really appreciate you being here. I hope that this program was at least thought-provoking. I do encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com, sign up for our newsletter, check out all of the resources we have available, and I look forward to hearing from you. Stay in touch. Thank you.